But welcome, LinkedIn Live audience, and welcome to this month's live Women in CX panel debate. I'll be your host, Clive Muscat, and I'm the very proud founder of Women in CX, the world's first online membership community for women in customer experience. Before I introduce today's topic and my very esteemed guests, I'd love to get the chat started. So please do let us know, where in the world are you joining us from today? And whilst we're waiting for a few more people to join in the background, I'd just like to shout out to my amazing team supporting this live stream. We've got Meg here in the background coordinating, and also Harley is supporting you in the chat. And before we get started, I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about Women in CX and what we do. And for anyone who's not familiar with us, we started out as a podcast during the pandemic of 2020 as a platform for women to share their career stories, experiences and ideas about customer experience, and became a startup community on International Women's Day 2021. We've co-designed our community together with our members and founding members, with our mission being to unite women across the globe to collaborate, inspire and support one another on the path to CX mastery. And now, almost 2 years on, our community spans over 50 countries, with access to a private social media network, networking events, guest webinars, member-led masterclasses and case studies, plus a whole resource library of exclusive content to help our members flourish both professionally and personally. This year has also launched a whole host of exclusive member features, including a mentoring scheme to help women find their dream mentor, a member directory to connect women with subject matter experts who can help them solve challenges, a weekly CX news roundup featuring the latest news on hot topics, and even a list of approved coaches to support women with their goals. Our events program's flourishing, with events happening in person all around the world, and our first global gathering conference actually happened in October last year, with our next one booked for October the 11th this year. And our community is flooded with stories of success, of promotions, pay rises, new jobs and businesses. And with Wix courses opening really soon, we can't wait to see what our community members achieve next. Our membership is now open to application. So if you'd like to sign up for a 7-day free trial, ladies, the link is now in the chat. We even offer a social pricing model and free scholarship places for women out of work to ensure social and economic barriers to taking part are removed in the spirit of true equity. We're on a mission to amplify the voices of women in our industry, hence taking what was previously a roundtable discussion inside the community live to you, our audience here on LinkedIn today. So just as a reminder, today we're going to be discussing results-driven CX, and we're going to be challenging the myths that exist around data, metrics and ROI. But before we get started, should we have a little look and see who is in the chat? Oh, got Serena saying hello from Michigan. Who else have we got? We've got people dialing in from Jakarta, Switzerland. Rebecca in Nottingham. Hi, Adri in Barcelona. Tara from Dubai, Bonatito too. Welcome, ladies. Lovely to have you. Rita in Vienna as well. Fabulous to have you. So, I think we're ready now. Let's get this show on the road. So just as a reminder about what this panel is about today, it's been reported that most CX programs fail to deliver commercial results. Some say the problem is that the customer experience industry operates under a delusion, one that stipulates increasing satisfaction, loyalty and advocacy as a route to business growth. Based on this doctrine, billions of dollars are spent each year on CX technology dedicated to data, metrics and ROI. KPIs like NPS are set to measure the success, and CX resources are directed at CSAT pain points. But there is evidence to the contrary. In reality, businesses grow as a result of customer acquisition, and most customer loss is in fact unavoidable. Advocacy mainly occurs in the early stages of a relationship, and satisfaction is only ever relative to the perception of expectations. So there's an increasing concern that pursuing traditional metrics, CX strategies are missing the biggest opportunities to help businesses achieve their number one goal, which is growth. So what's the alternative? Well, today I'm joined by a panel of amazing members from the Women in CX community to discuss CX data metrics and ROI and uncover how we can shift our focus away from chasing metrics to adding value to customers, employees and the business with our efforts to improve CX. And audience, we'd love you to get involved by commenting in the chat and asking questions. And our final 15 minutes today will be dedicated to asking our expert panel your biggest questions too. So without further ado, please welcome to the stage Marina Shapira, Customer Insights Manager at Oracle, Lynn Hunsaker, Chief Customer Officer at Clear Action Continuum, and Sarah Ackling, Client Success Director at Kantar. Welcome, ladies.
Hello, hello.
Hi there.
Hi. So just so we can let our wonderful audience know a little bit more about you, I'd love you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more about your connection to the subject of today, which is data, metrics, and ROI. And Marina, as you're on my right, I'm going to pick on you first.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Marina. I'm a doctor of psychology, and I work as a customer insights manager at Oracle. My team is focused on helping the organization at large, making data-driven decisions and get closer to the customer. We do that by providing tools, resources, analyses, insights to the organization, and hopefully they're actionable and help them, make the right decision in the product development journey.
Yeah, and you've got quite an interesting background that brought you to this point, right?
Yes, I started in psychology and then transitioned into technology. And now I'm super passionate about connecting behavioral science and all the things we know from psychology and infusing them into how we make products for people better.
Yes, love it, love it. And now I'm going to go immediately down to Lynn.
Hello, everyone. Well, I started out in the strategic planning department as voice of the customer manager and went on to the quality department in another company in that role. And we looked at metrics very differently than people typically do today. We had what we called early warning signals and customer critical factors that were our main focus. And we were able to save millions of hours and dollars for ourselves and our customers and critical relationships, and managed to stay in that role over many, many years, leading company-wide customer experience. So now I'm at Clear Action Continuum, which is e-learning as remarkably powerful and affordable consulting. So everything in small bites and small amounts that help you to really propel your maturity in this field.
And last but not least, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Ackling. I'm a Senior Client Success Director at Kantar, based out of the London office. I've been working at Kantar for the last 4 years, but working in the area of customer experience for the last 15 years or so. So I guess during that time, I've sort of seen the transition from traditional CSAT programs to the move into sort of a more of a holistic customer experience field, working on sort of big multi-market programs, transactional and sort of strategic. Happy to be here today.
Yes, I'm so glad you're all here with us today. I'm so glad our audience, with so many members. I can see you all in the chat, ladies. Just saw Mindy arrive from New York as well. Fabulous to see so many people turn up today. Vanessa as well. Hi. Ola Doyen, lovely to see you too. Thank you so much for joining us. So this was a deliberately provocative subject today. Being able to really challenge some of these myths that exist around data metrics and ROI. And I'm going to start with ROI. So the big question here, ladies, is it even truly possible to measure the ROI of customer experience, or is it simply too intangible? So I know for me as a practitioner, when I was working on the business side and now living in startup land, I tend to be much more interested in key metrics and projects and seeing where alterations drive different results, and actually being able to ladder back to things like acquisition and growth being increasingly more important than perhaps when I was on the business side, where I was looking more at if I drive satisfaction over here, I assume or hope there'll be some kind of correlation elsewhere down the line, and that might translate to ROI. So Marina, I know that you've got so much kind of a depth in data perspective on this. What's your view on whether or not we can actually prove ROI of customer experience?
Yeah, that's a great question, one that's I'm asked frequently of stakeholders. And I think if we look at the field of psychology and see that for many years, we've been measuring things that are very fuzzy and very intangible, right? If we'll take the example of different situations like anxiety or depression, we don't have a blood test for that, right? We measure those constructs with questions with questionnaires that they have been validated over many years, but they're not a perfect measure by any means. And we need to have these proxy measures. So the same happens in customer experience. Some of those metrics like loyalty and satisfaction are inherently subjective. They're attitudinal, they're a little bit fuzzy, and some get uncomfortable when we need to measure those and then show that their improvement is then translated to some business metric down the line. But I definitely think that is possible. It won't be one-to-one, it won't be perfect, but not doing that at all puts us at a much greater risk than taking the chance of doing something, a measurement that may not be perfect. And we also have the chance to continually iterate it, right? We test something, we check, we make it better. It's a continuous development process. But I would not, don't get discouraged if something is fuzzy or hard to measure. Just get going, start, and move from there.
Interesting. And I think sometimes it's the only department that's ever as rigorously asked to prove its return on investment, isn't it? I don't think the sales team can get quite so challenged as customer experience does. And I guess I personally have a question about whether part of the problem is trying to measure the return on investment of the entire experience as opposed to critical moments or areas that might lap over into marketing or customer engagement. Trying to measure this like fairly intangible, fuzzy thing that's incredibly subjective from a business point of view might be part of the problem. So Sarah, I'm going to come to you and ask you the same question. What are your thoughts on whether customer experience is possible to measure and improve the ROI of?
Yeah, I think we see when a program stops or is paused. I've seen examples in the past where industry scores on kind of industry surveys go down. So I think we do know that having transactional programs and closed loop feedback is a constant sort of monitor for companies. I think we can sort of track that output in other ways as well, looking at customer lifetime value, looking at churn rate, average sort of transaction and spend. From a day-to-day point of view, I think I see sort of ROI in the programs that I run through looking at sort of business change. So being able to sort of make that business change through feedback that you see through a CX program, I think that's also very, very powerful. So I think, potentially less tangible, but we're seeing sort of changes and actions as a result from CX sort of like every day.
That's interesting to say. When things stopped being measured, they stopped getting done. And we know one of the challenges in, I suppose, the more customer facing end is people relentlessly trying to chase those measures and chase those metrics rather than necessarily thinking about delivering great experiences on a day-to-day basis. So Lynn, I'm going to come to you next basically to flesh this out a little bit more. So
sure.
Do you think companies are placing too much emphasis on metrics at the expense of really understanding and connecting with their customers?
Exactly. Well, it's like anytime you're driving a car, or imagine yourself driving an airplane, piloting an airplane, you're going to have a lot of different things that tell you how well certain parts of the experience are doing well. And we need to be reminding our executives that the investment community does not just pick one metric and feel comfortable with that. The investment community uses multiple metrics to assess how healthy a company is. And we need to be using multiple metrics to assess how healthy our customer experience is. And it doesn't have to be touchy-feely. It can be quite scientific. Certainly what customers feel or perceive may be seen as executives as touchy-feely, but there's so many other things in business that aren't hardcore. There are things that we make decisions on that all the time that we don't have 100% certainty about. But here's how you can be certain about customer experience and get your focus in the right place. To answer your question, Claire, we need to be looking at multiple aspects of the experience and monitoring those in conjunction with an index like Net Promoter or Effort Score, whatever you want to use. What you do is a correlation analysis of that, also known as key driver analysis, very common. and really make use of that by creating yet another level of metrics, which is what are the vital few aspects of those key drivers. You figure that out by a Pareto analysis. And then yet another level of metrics in your piloting for the getting the aircraft to where you need to go. That other level is your early warning signals or customer critical factors, which are figured out by a root cause analysis. So by doing that scientific drill down, you can focus people on work aspects that are going wrong, that are causing a poor experience. And this is where we're really missing the boat in over-focusing on the end result and extreme under-focus on the root issues that drive the behaviors that create good experiences and hence good ROI.
Interesting. I've seen some similarities there between something that Marina had said as well. And I think key driver analytics, being able to understand what's important to customers and how are we performing on those things that are most important to customers. I can get that. I agree with that. But what is the difference, I'm going to ask Marina this, between correlation and causation? Because I think that's one of the challenges, isn't it? Whether something correlates or is causal. Can you explain the difference?
Absolutely. So, we often mistake the two, and it's easy to do so. And, correlation is when things change together in a trend in one direction, right? Intelligence is correlated with shoe size, right? If they go up together, does it mean that shoe size causes us to be more intelligent? No, we just grow up, we become more intelligent, and our shoe size, increases as well. So that's correlation. And causation is when we can show with, statistical modeling that one factor is actually causing a change in a different factor. So, for example, if we want to see how early adoption with a digital product is then driving further engagement and retention, there are specific models that we can use to calculate, for example, to what extent the frequency is then correlated to those, causing the next kind of positive things that we're looking in the journey, right? And those different factors, they all have different weights. It's never like one thing is 100% explaining the causality in something else. We need to look at a host of those factors, just like Lynn mentioned, right? We want to look at what customers think and feel. We want to look at what they do. We want to understand all of these touch points and triangulate them. We want to see that we have these multiple data sources that are pointing to one conclusion, hopefully, right? This is called construct validity. Then we know that we're measuring something that's real in the world, and we're not just inventing some construct and we think it's true. It's actually true in the customer's reality. And by using these tools, we can get more confident. And I think that will actually make us, much closer to our customers and will help us create products that are much better personalized to them because we know the patterns of behavior and we know what to expect versus kind of losing that human touch. So technology and human touch should not be interchangeable, right? We should use technology to improve, being closer to our customers, understanding them better and creating better solutions for them.
I'm just watching the chat here. There's a few really interesting comments coming up, such as the executives, so the senior level, sometimes mistake quantity of data for quality of insights. And I know I've seen it myself, these huge metric heavy, quant heavy reports measuring absolutely everything, but where's the insight? Right. I think what you're describing there is the analytics capability that is sometimes missing, particularly when it comes to these customer experience aspects that might be being applied perhaps in like operational or BI intelligence, that being able to find that intersection with the customer data and data about experience to prove causation is lacking. And the investment required to do that is quite challenging, isn't it, for most companies if they don't have a dedicated data analytics division?
Absolutely. And I would really encourage everyone to never present a metric in isolation without context. That can get misinterpreted very, very quickly. particularly when there's an increase or decrease. When we're talking about, reporting to executive leadership, what does it mean, that half point decrease, right? So always start with kind of a one big simple sentence in English above your chart, above your metric. What does this mean? And caveat, right? Is this directional? Is this causal? How much confidence can we place in this? And the words that describe the metric in your are much more important than the metrics itself if you want to influence change.
The importance of storytelling behind the data rather than just presenting the data. And someone else, I can't see whose name it was because it just says LinkedIn user on my side, but talking about OKRs, which I'm loving at the moment, being able to establish, well, what is the actual organizational goal and what are the sub goals within that, and how do the actions that we take or the things we focus on actually deliver that. So I think the LinkedIn user has given us the example, say, to increase customer retention, and each department has different initiatives to do that, and some of those may well not be within the remit of, in inverted commas, customer experience. Serena's giving you props there, saying really well summarized the importance of the meaning of numbers, and thank you for touching on not losing the human touch in customer experience when it comes to the quantification of it. So Lynn, I'm going to come back to you again. Do you think that companies might be relying, those ones who do have data capabilities, more over relying on the data rather than customer feedback and input? I know that there's a trend at the moment for saying data driven, decisions being made driven by data, not informed by data, but driven by data. What are your thoughts on that aspect?
There's a lot of different types of data. I like to call it expectations VOC and realities VOC. So expectations VOC is mostly qualitative, and you need to be using those customer comments, any audio, video, things like that are verbatims in particular, to help people empathize with customers, and most importantly, to help every department to identify their performance standards in the context of what's important to customers, or to modify their performance standards in accordance with customers' expectations. And when you have that, you're going to be preventing poor experiences to an equal or greater degree as creating good experiences. And that's a huge imbalance in today's practices and customer experience.
And just talking about like helpful strategies that the audience can take away, like voice to customers become very survey heavy, hasn't it? Like at point of purchase or post-purchase rationalization, that's what customer feedback is. But there are so many other ways, aren't there, to build customer engagement in product development. I know that we do co-design over in the community, and look to capture feedback from multiple sources, not just a survey once every now and again. Does anyone have any advice on how we can get great customer feedback and ensure, as Rita's saying, ensure that we represent the humans behind the data?
I'd just like to say that if you are following that initial recipe that I shared with you about the customer critical factors, you can be monitoring people's performance on the job according to those factors instead of constantly asking customers to give you yet another survey feedback. It's way overkill. You can make it easy for people to give feedback anytime, any way they want, to be democratic and universally opening your arms to their feedback, but quit asking constantly on these transactions, because what you really should be doing is just focusing on the underlying behaviors and therefore you wouldn't have to use surveys as much. In fact, you can use a lot of operational data and other digital indicators, sentiment, voice tone, things like that. You can pretty much figure out if the customer was happy with the call and if they would likely recommend you. And it's just unnecessary with today's technology. We should be using the data mining, voice mining, sentiment mining way more, and asking less and doing more to prevent poor experience.
I'm going to bring up a potential myth here. because a few people are starting to mention Net Promoter Score in the chat. But in reality, it's been proven that customers tend to only recommend a brand or business in the early stages of a relationship. Yet we invest in trying to understand whether or not they would recommend us, rather than whether or not advocacy is actually taking place. Does anyone have a point of view on whether or not this is a stable measure to be hanging our hat on and measuring teams against, and judging whether or not growth is occurring?
Yeah, I think that people will recommend more once you have an established relationship, but don't ask it that way. Ask, what are you trying to get done, and how well are we contributing to that? When you know that people appreciate your contributions to their goals, you can infer that they were going to recommend you. I actually won't even answer that question anymore, because I'm really tired of these surveys being about the brand instead of about me as a customer. If they're asking me about me, I'll tell them. But if they're just wanting to know whether I would recommend them, I don't find that to be a customer-centric question. And I think that there are better ways these days.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the chat. Everybody's reacted to this one. So Sarah, go on.
No, I was just about to say that I think it needs to be looked at in terms of big picture. So if you've got a KPI framework and you're looking at sort of different metrics across the whole end-to-end customer journey, then there's other metrics that you can use to compare it with. So not in isolation and known, but as part of a sort of a suite of metrics that you'll be using together.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can also add some questions to the classical kind of rating question, perhaps adding, open form fields and ask people to say a little bit more, or adding another question after that will give more of that, asking about the customer, like you're saying, Lynn, because sometimes we, executives do want us to measure that metric, right? So we need to find a balance between what is still asked, and just make the best of that metric and see what we can do with it if we're asked to measure it. But if it's a blank canvas and we can build everything from scratch, that's a different story. But many folks find themselves in the situation where this is still a very critical, important, central metric. So I would say just let's add those additional factors around it that can make it a more well-rounded question, and also understand what's driving that specific rating in that context. And asking it contextually will also help, rather than sending a survey that's completely isolated from the product experience. And companies do that more, right? If you finish a particular task and then you have the survey pop up in the context, then it's less biasing, right? If we suddenly get a random survey over email, how likely to recommend some product that I already forgot about, the rating won't reflect reality that much. So different tricks that we can use to improve that metric.
So a bit related to this, because obviously the key things typically that are measured are the outcome of, if you can count it as an outcome, net promoter, and the inputs, key drivers, and satisfaction against key drivers. But for Sarah, I'm going to ask you this one. In the pursuit of increased customer satisfaction through data metrics, is that actually leading to an overall decrease in customer loyalty? I think somebody else has pointed out in the chat that things like NPS and satisfaction can't tell you anything about expectations, and satisfaction is usually as a result of whether or not expectations are met. Yeah, Louise Fox, good point. What's your view on that one?
Yeah, I think we should be increasing the customer loyalty as a result of our customer experience efforts. So we're trying to sort of uncover blind spots and trying to understand the full customer experience. So we're trying to improve the way that they interact with the organization to stay a loyal customer. So I think it's kind of that's the goal of what we want to do. We want to make sure that these customers are staying. So to be able to sort of track that from an end-to-end view, we absolutely should be keeping those customers. So I would.
But back to the myth again. If loyalty doesn't exist in the way that we assume it does, that satisfied customers stay, churn happens as a result of millions of different factors, like no longer needing the product, moving away out of the town that they were previously purchasing from. how can we be so sure that those two things are so connected, and that our justification for something like customer experience should be about loyalty, rather than, if we smooth barriers to purchase, we'll be able to increase our customer numbers and revenue. If we improve or remove barriers to adoption of a product or service, that people are going to use more and buy more. Like, why aren't we looking at things from an experience point of view more that way, rather than assuming that loyalty and retention is going to be as a result entirely of experience? Thoughts?
Yeah, I think that it's a moving target. You've got customers moving jobs, changing their circumstances in their life. You don't necessarily have those promoters from last year in the same pool of needing your product or being accessible to it this year. So when you're looking at people in pools, that can be a slippery slope, as you're describing. I think what we need to be thinking about is brand integrity. And that means that if you are clear and sure about your brand being on target with a key need in the market and having a superior capability for that need, then that is your brand promise. And the major role, the primary role of a customer experience team is brand integrity, because nobody is minding that gap. You have your sales and marketing people out there advocating this promise, and then you have everyone else in the whole company delivering on the promise. When you have a gap between what's promised or expected by customers and what they get, that's where you have massive costs to the company and churn, cost to serve, escalations, negative word of mouth, and all this rigmarole that's pretty remedial in customer experience management. Where if you are focusing on that brand integrity, getting a one-to-one ratio between what customers get and what they're expecting, that means you need to be engaging every group in your company to own their root causes of customer critical factors that then will prevent problems in what customers experience from the get-go. So you're actually preventing issues in the first place, which then drives that magnetic attraction to your brand. So no matter if your customer base is moving on, your brand will be more stable with brand integrity, and therefore have better magnetic attraction for both new and existing customers.
So from a brand perspective, from a customer life cycle perspective, we're crossing over quite a lot of genres here, aren't we? Whether it's journey or brand. I think somebody pointed it out. I think it's perhaps Ken. So trying to move away from perhaps so much customer centricity and data metrics and ROI, and more into journey centricity or life cycle centricity in how we evaluate relative performance in a sense that translates back to business performance. I know the team and I on our side are actually just reviewing all of our measures at the moment. We're working towards having business intelligence one day. And just being so clear that you can't drive outcomes. You can only improve the inputs or these millions of different small things that contribute to those business outcomes being achieved, right? So, and it's your point, Lynn, helping the teams within organizations to really understand what they do that can be tweaked and altered to drive business outcomes, particularly in terms of where no one owns, I think you said, the gap around that end-to-end or customer experience, or that holistic view of customer is a really important point. So let's looking at the time. So we've got 25 minutes to go, about 10 minutes left before we open up the floor to questions from our audience. Start getting your questions ready. I know we've got some great ones in the chat already. But I think I'm going to go to Marina for this one. Mm-hmm. Do you think a company can truly improve the customer experience without investing in data analytics and measurement? Is it possible not to have all of this and still deliver a great customer experience?
That's a big one. There's a saying attributed to Peter Drucker, you can't improve what you don't measure. And I tend to agree with that. Not doing any measurement at all can be quite risky, because then you must base your decisions on something. And then that will be based on the opinions of people in the room. And then there are different things that can bias that, right? Influence in the room, that the person who's more senior can drive those decisions based on some personal biases he may have. And we are all biased all the time. And our decisions can be swayed by someone who annoyed us on the morning commute in the subsequent meeting, right? So we need to have those data sources that are, again, not one data source, a holistic view, that are hopefully triangulated in order to reduce that guesswork and increase the confidence and give the team an external anchor and kind of be less based on opinions. So, you know, I will find it hard to imagine that a company can truly, you know, really succeed without doing any sort of measurement. It doesn't have to be all the, you know, the most amazing analytics stack or the most mature one, but there must be intention there to hear the customer in some way.
Nice. I think from an operational point of view as well, having sort of closed loop feedback, there's a mechanism for teams to be able to respond to bad feedback. So to have a measure in the first place will help with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, nice agreement there. And we're getting lots of props for Lynn here on the concept of brand integrity and the role of customer experience in that. I'm going to open up a can of worms here, and I'm going to ask this question to all of you. But if we think about what's happening in the realms of customer data, more and more stuff being tracked. In some countries, the government is starting to impose restrictions on how we collect data. There are more rules occurring. The way that cookies are changing, the way that we actually are able to, you know, outside of direct customer feedback type insight, the kind of stuff that we can see actual behavior through analytics is changing. There's a bit of a more philosophical question, I think, around whether or not collection and analysis of customer data is actually a violation of privacy and trust, which could potentially affect brand integrity then. What are your thoughts? I'm going to go to Marina first on this one, because I know you have a perspective.
Sure. I think, you know, anyone who's relying on customer data to do their job needs to be very attentive to this field, because things are changing fast and we need to make sure that we are finding creative ways to adhere to that, right? You know, 10 years ago, for example, we were doing sampling on digital analytics data because we didn't have the infrastructure to host all of that data. Then infrastructure improved, we moved to collecting 100%. Now we're getting back to sampling again for privacy reasons. And that's one way, a creative way, you know, to help mitigate some of those privacy concerns. But, you know, we need to be best buddies with our security and privacy teams in the organization and work together and kind of stay ahead of the curve. And certainly there are ethical ways to do that. And that's why there are excellent teams across the world who are creating those guidelines, and we must adhere to them. And the field is moving much more towards transparency and getting consent and opt-in. And of course, we need to think what that means for our sample, right? If someone opted in, that means something. But then again, you know, we put that on a higher pedestal, right? It's more important that we get, you know, in accordance to all the guidelines. And but I still think we can find creative ways to get a well-balanced sample from that data, and most importantly, protect the privacy of our customers.
Nice. Anyone else have an opinion to share on that? The ethics of data, customer data?
I think we just got to have a responsibility to support our clients on sort of an ethical viewpoint on things like this. So not using data that's not relevant, making sure we only need to use things that it is relevant to what we're doing. So I guess an example at the moment would be sort of connected cars and all the information that you can get from a car. How can we use that to improve the customer experience or inform our data insights, but without in an ethical way, without being kind of intrusive to customers.
Yeah,
so some of this is sort of uncharted territory, and there aren't even any laws on it yet. So I think it's about doing the right thing. But
Yeah, I would just add a caution that if you're having a lot of disclaimers, these constant cookies that people have to accept, things like that, it fosters distrust. Because myself, I've been researching a lot of things, and I come across these cookie acceptance things. And I'm like, I don't have time to read your thing. I don't really care. I don't really like that, you're reminding me that you're looking at all my stuff. It just needs to be simpler. And frankly, I think that we need to be using existing data more creatively, like my colleagues have suggested, such as looking for patterns in what people are already saying, and not just patterns in terms of what you can plug into a software and voila, out pops some analysis. In the old days, we would actually look at the data in terms of outliers and trends and connecting this source and that source, and using a variety of almost free VOC as the basis for asking better questions and creating better analyses. Almost free VOC is that stuff that we've been talking about, these digital things, as well as your observations of people who are interfacing with customers. Are we asking them what they're seeing, and using that as a basis for what we look for with our customers and ask them? I think that we're just really underutilizing a lot of data that's already there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So thank you, ladies. Before we move on to the questions from the audience, is there like one kind of top takeaway or final thought you'd like to leave the audience with that summarizes your view on busting the myth that exists in data metrics and ROI, Marina?
Wow, that's a good one. I think, get going, don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. You'll improve along the way. Doing any measurement is better than not doing anything at all. So just get started, and I'm sure you'll see good results with effort and intention.
Nice. Lynn, your thoughts?
Yeah,
takeaway?
Be prevention oriented, and don't be shy trying to engage every single group in your entire company doing their part to prevent problems for customers. That's the main thing that we need to be focusing on.
Keeping it simple. Sarah?
And I think, I would just say again about sort of seeing the ROI through the business change. So don't be afraid to make change as a result of customer feedback, and see how that goes.
Nice. So I think my kind of takeaway from this is about thinking less about customer experience in isolation and trying to measure the effectiveness and value of that as a whole thing, and being able to understand business objectives and outcomes and where those key moments in time are that do actually drive a measurable result that links back to the business's organizational outcomes. So less obsession with thinking customer experience is going to drive loyalty, and more how do we prevent problems and avoid attrition due to us making a mistake is a worthwhile space for customer experience to flow in. The world is a myriad of different data sets now, whether that be data that comes from the voice of the customer directly, or it's through actual purchase history, or it's actually behavioral and analytics on site. Like being able to bring all of those views together to understand the difference between causation and correlation is the next iteration that we're going to be needing to head towards. And as digital increases, it's everywhere now, isn't it? There are probably some new business intelligence capabilities to fuse with CX to continue to drive something that isn't just numbers and metrics. It's still human in its understanding point, and something that we can really engage stakeholders around the people behind this data. So I'm going to go now to our questions from the audience. And the first one actually draws directly from that last point about companies, execs will say, the senior teams that so often people working in our field are trying to influence, the ones that are more interested in the numbers than the stories, perhaps sometimes. Nicole was asking, what are some strategies we can employ to get people on board with the initiatives that we're trying to drive when it comes to customer or experience?
Yeah, I call it customer experience annuities. And that's the concept that everything that we're doing to save customer churn is costing a lot to the company, even the customer success department, customer service, the customer loyalty program. You have all this user experience stuff, and even if you just take the formal customer experience teams out of the equation and all those investments, the company is still paying a lot of money to try to hold on to customers or make up for customers leaving. There's a lot more marketing and sales spend, for example, in order to offset those who left and still have incrementally more revenue month by month. So what customer experience annuities is stopping the insanity. As you expand your customers, you're only going to have to continually expand the cost to serve in total. So let's get to the root issue of some of these prevalent customer issues and stop them happening anymore. That means that the money that would have had to be invested next year and the next year and the next year on those particular issues is freed up. And so when you free up that cost to serve, you can take that money and put it to other higher value opportunities. So this is a phrase that I've coined called customer experience annuities. And it's all about stopping prevalent issues, taking the money that would have had to be invested to address those particular issues and putting it into higher value. And this is a huge missed opportunity that we are not explaining to our executives and focusing our positioning as brand integrity stewards for the company based on that. This way you have the executives looking for you to close the gap to save all this money, which in turn actually generates more revenue and growth opportunities in many levels. It actually has so many levels, it's exponentially powerful.
I get that. And where we can see there's clear causation between a customer problem and loss, and being able to be clear about those annuities for executives, that investing in this and fixing this is going to save. But there's so much loss that is not attributable or clearly attributable to anything to do with the experience. As I said, circumstances change in a B2B environment, maybe less so, but price sensitivity, affordability, like loads of other factors that we can't actually control. So yes, I agree with where we can spot causation of we cause a problem over here and that's why they leave, but it's just the warning not to assume that we can deal with the entirety of churn and put our numbers against fixing that with the investments that we're asking to make. And ladies, Sarah, Marina, what are your thoughts on how we influence stakeholders?
Yeah, I mean, Lane, that was a brilliant concept. Thanks for introducing that. And I think about my stakeholders in all levels as my customers. So I'm trying to understand them first and what was their previous experience with metrics. I did encounter some executives that are actually weary of measurement. They don't want those hard numbers, right? So we need to understand who's the personality we're talking to and tailor our message, our requests to them. Some folks like to move very fast and do a lot of things at one time. Others want to kind of take it step by step. Let's make a small improvement, see how that works versus. So if I come to an executive who is more kind of step by step prone and I introduce 20 insights and let's improve this, and this, then, the conversation is not going to go anywhere. It's just going to shut down. So we, as much as possible, need to know who we're speaking to, what's their kind of style of communication, how they like to learn, how they like to receive information, and their kind of action tendencies. And I think by working on that collaboration, we can get much more in the organization, even if it's not all that we wanted to get. It's okay to have some things in the drawer and kind of pull them out as we go, and make sure that we are pacing along with the company and not against it. So that would be my advice.
I would say also sort of, using customer feedback to justify business decisions. So there's probably known issues within an organization, but it's such a powerful tool to be able to take that customer feedback to make that a reality within the organization. So I think you mentioned, Claire, about sort of price. I think that can even come out through a customer experience. So kind of communicating those results, but making them real to the execs by bringing it to life with a specific customer, and also working with them to make solutions actionable. So actually taking those that customer feedback and then making like strong recommendations on what they should do with it, and in terms of sort of which functional area that should sit with. So being very explicit as to what we believe should the next step should be.
And related to that, so I can't see who said this question, but this LinkedIn user said, I pushed my team, if you won't act on a data point or insight from interview quote to tell the story to execs, don't use it. Not everyone loves this stuff as much as us. How do you approach speaking to different stakeholders? So you said like the example of, back things up with quotes and real customer feedback. Are there different types of stakeholder that perhaps respond better to different approaches in terms of how we relay this stuff?
Yeah, there's a couple of layers that you're talking about. One is, what functional area do they represent, and therefore what are their hot buttons? What are the forces that are pressuring them? And I went to lunch with a lot of different people in my company from different groups to understand what's going on in their job, what kind of words they use. And whenever I would have my team present things or report things or figure out the timing to engage those groups, we would go back to those crib notes. What kinds of things we need to be incorporating so that we're speaking their language. And in fact, you can even study what is it that each group has to report on, what are the things that they're involved in externally, like their associations, like Customer Experience Association for us. Every group has something like that, and get in sync with them. The other layer, though, is stakeholder analysis more generally, in terms of like what Marina was talking about, certain personality types, certain levels of readiness for certain things, or things that are holding people back because they have a sense of perceived cost to embrace an idea. So we would also have every so many weeks a change management session in my team. We're just looking at our stakeholder analysis templates and figuring out what each group in the company needed from us to be guided and to be facilitated in continual momentum in the work that we were doing in customer experience.
Nice.
Yeah.
Any other advice for our audience on how to approach speaking to different stakeholders? Sarah, Marina?
Yeah, I think it's just to know your stakeholders. So be working with them very closely and understand sort of what kind of business pressures, what challenges they're facing, and how our feedback will feed into that.
Yeah, so treating them like an internal customer to some extent.
Absolutely. Yeah, we sometimes send surveys about our services internally, so kind of measuring our own performance with the tools that we advocate. So it's kind of a meta experience.
That's super meta. Yeah. How likely are you to recommend the customer experience team? Only joking. We're going to get into some slightly more geeky questions here, and this one from Ragav Mohan is, how can we better triangulate analytics and quantitative data with qualitative data? And this is a bit similar to what Ken's saying, is how do you weight customer feedback and qualitative feedback perhaps and commentary versus data? So let's position this. So what have we got in the data box, and what have we got in the quantitative and qualitative? So qualitative would be primary research, perhaps focus group feedback, verbatim feedback, comments, voice analytics, sentiment analytics, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then quantitative would be survey scores, metrics, actual data points about real behavior, numbers, sales, that kind of thing. Is that right? We in agreement that that's the difference between qual and quant? Yeah. Okay, so how do we, I'm going to say triangulating analytics, I think is probably a Marina question. And then we can talk about how we weigh up customer feedback versus data.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, for me, it's all data, I must say, just different sources. So, we need some sort of a framework. So we need to have some theoretical understanding of how these things fit together from the get-go. So we talk about this in the same concepts. I know it sounds very vague, but a team needs to do some kind of critical theoretical thinking about these different touch points and have a framework to put all the things together. And that will change between companies, right? But just as an example for kind of an easy way to triangulate is, for example, ask for customer satisfaction score or feedback in the context of your, let's say, product. Someone finished a task, you ask them then the question, and then you can look at the funnel completion of that specific step in your analytics. So you know exactly what they did, you know what the happy path that your designer wanted to have there. You can look at their behavior and you know their opinion in that exact moment. So that's one example for kind of creating a relatively easy triangulation points. But then also, like we said, creating those questions that, for example, the causality, right? And we want to create a distance in time between a certain behavior and then a certain outcome, and set those analytical models in place in time, so we capture the early signals and we can get the outcome and continuously iterate on those models and train them and improve them. Hopefully that was specific enough.
No, that was brilliant, and we've had our 1 minute warning. So Lynn, Sarah, anything to add to that before we close up?
Yeah, I'm just a huge fan of using metrics or quantitative data as an overview and something that is directionally correct, and really making wide and deep use of comments. I cringe when I see a report where the comments are all in the appendix or just summarized as how many happened, or here's a few key comments. We need to be letting people read them, hear them, act on them. I really use comments a lot in workshops and everything, because that's where you really get the diagnostic or prescriptive advice and the real inspiration to be in alignment with your customers.
Yeah. I would just say that it has to all be used together to enrich the whole story.
Thank you so much, ladies. It's been wonderful having you. I think the depth of expertise, the difference of perspective here, the diversity of representatives on this panel has been fantastic. I think the comments from the audience are testament to what you've brought to the table today in terms of your insights and thoughts and ideas. And just like to finally thank the audience. You've been amazing. Thank you for engaging so much in the comment, asking so many wonderful questions. As I said at the beginning, any ladies who would like to join the Women in CX community, please do check us out on womenincx.community. And hopefully see you all in the community soon. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, ladies. We'll see you all next time. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.